So H.G. Wells is important to science fiction and to literature in general simply because he is one of the most influential and most well-read and most well-regarded writers of his time. Along with Jules Verne, he is one of the major founders of the genre of science fiction. What he does is he takes important scientific thoughts and important scientific theories and social theories, and he puts them into fiction in a way that is appealing to the public, and that's what makes him important. So important, in fact, that The War of the Worlds has never been out of print. What you have in The War of the Worlds is a text that can be read in a multitude of ways, as most really good literature can. So you could read War of the Worlds, for instance, as a social commentary upon the notion of colonialization that was going on by England during the 1890s when the story came out, because what you have is essentially the Martians cruelly colonizing London in the way that England has in many cases cruelly colonized other parts of the world. You could look at it as social Darwinism, the people who survive and the people who do not, based upon their genetics, their social skills, their intelligence, etc. There is social commentary about the importance of infrastructure, about fear of the other. The way that we look at our world is often colored by and informed by the fiction that we consume, and Wells is a very good example of that, and that is a tradition that has carried through science fiction literature ever since. This is where we ask the question, what if? And if you ask the question, what if dragons are involved in the War of 1812? What if women are in charge of everything and the patriarchy doesn't exist? What if people come from another planet and teach us a new way of being that is better than the one that we had? And what if it's not better? And what if we turn things into a dystopia, like in the Hunger Games, where we're all competing for resources? What if the world runs out of water? What if the world runs out of oil? These are all social issues that come to the fore in science fiction and fantasy literature. Many of the major concepts that are still quite common tropes in science fiction come from stories that are like the ones that H.G. Wells wrote. So War of the Worlds, of course, is a story about an alien invasion, and that is a very common trope in science fiction in all of its media. Independence Day, Will Smith film from the late 1990s. It's an alien invasion of Earth. It is exactly the trope that Wells is using in War of the Worlds. One of the most popularized stories of H.G. Wells is the time machine. So the notion of a time machine that takes people in different places through time and space is, of course, a hugely popular one, especially if we look at current and long-running series in the UK, like, say, Doctor Who. H.G. Wells actually appears as a character on Doctor Who in the 1980s in a story called Time Lash, where he wanders into the TARDIS, which is a time machine, and immediately recognizes what it is and helps the Doctor to solve the problem at hand and thereby return people to their respective places and times. Wells's own story has been reworked and reused so many times, most famously by Orson Welles in the 1930s as a radio drama, where for the first 40 minutes out of the 60 minutes of the radio drama, people were actually having essentially a mass hallucination. They thought that the Martian invasion was real. A lot of our notions about the planet Mars may actually come from War of the Worlds. The notion that there are canals on Mars that transmit water from one place to another, for instance, was part of the scientific literature at the time. Wells wrote it into his story, and for many people, those descriptions of Mars are amongst the first exposure we have to learning about the universe around us and off of our planet, which may lead us into learning more about science afterwards.